All right. We're live, and I'm going to check mic here. There we go. There. Forge Gang! I am still a heart man. Let's go. How are you all doing this evening? How are all of y'all doing this evening? I will be talking about, as I continue my series that I have done prehistory, the prehistoric world, the Old Testament, and Egypt. Now I'm going to do India. So I'll be doing India tonight. Please do sit back and enjoy, and I hope that you enjoy watching. So this will be my presentation of the history of India. And so let's just go straight into it here. There we go. All right, so this will be daily life in ancient India, ancient Hindustan. Yeah, anyways. So, daily life in ancient India. The daily life of the people of ancient India is based on the excavated sites, inscriptions, and the religious textbook written. They're talking about the Vedas and the Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit texts in general. They provide glimpses of the lifestyle prevalent during that time and help in constructing a near authentic picture of the daily life in ancient India. The daily life of the Indus Valley civilization that flourished between 3000 to 2500 BC can be traced from the remains of the ancient sites of the Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro cities that were discovered by archaeologists in 1922. In these cities, houses were found to be made of baked brick, and the houses had flat roofs. The houses were single or double-storied with courtyard having walls and bathrooms. The cities had streets with well-connected drainage system. With a well-connected drainage system. It had a large central storage building for grain. The discovery of public swimming pools leads to infer that religious bathing was common during that time. The smaller rooms and pools for dressing rooms and private baths for the important people of the town. Ancient Indian daily life in Indus Valley civilization. The people of the Indus Valley civilization ate vegetarian and non-vegetarian food. They ate wheat, barley, dates, and vegetables. They domesticated animals for their meat that included sheep, pigs, zebus, a kind of cow, and water buffaloes. Their diet included fish, which they caught from the rivers using fishing rods with hooks. The people of Indus Valley wore colorful robes, with women wearing gold and precious stone jewelry and embroidery. The dancing figure reveals that people loved dancing and singing. The children used to play with small carts, toys, shaped as birds, monkeys, etc., are found from the excavated sites. The Indus people were excellent craftsmen. They were skilled potters and weavers. The artifacts discovered suggest they could produce exquisite pieces of craft work. They also excelled in the metalwork. The Indus people used wooden carts with wheels for transportation. They also used boats and ships to carry out trade. Pictographic seals have been found proving trade links between Indus Valley and Mesopotamian civilizations. Ancient Indian daily life in Indo-Aryan people or Indo-Aryan people. The arrival of the Indo-Aryan or Aryan people, the arrival of the Indo-Aryan people from Central Asia and beyond, and their settling down in North Indian plains marks the beginning of the Vedic Age. This Vedic Age roughly covers the period from 1500 BC to 600 BC. The information about the daily life of the Aryan people could be inferred from the Vedas that was written over a period of time. Further books like the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and Ramana, written in the later period, contain description of people's life, rituals, beliefs, wars, and other achievements. The Aryan people lived in houses made from wood and straw. Their life centered on a community fireplace called yagna. Here, people used to meet and share their life together. Their religious life centered on many gods and goddesses. Ancient Indian life in the Vedic period or Vedic period. In the earlier Vedic period, the tribes were called Gana, which had a chief, and this was a hereditary title that passed from father down to son. The Aryan people started growing cotton, and from that they weaved clothes. The dress was almost same for both the sexes. Men usually wrapped cloth around their waist and covered their lower part of the body. The upper part was uncovered, but they wore a headdress. Women wore a two-piece of clothing. A length of cloth was wrapped around the lower part, and a loose fitting cloth covered the upper part. Later, women started wearing skirt, a large wrap around the waist and below, with loose tops, cholis, with a headdress. Rich women used to wear jewels and leather shoes. Women wore jewelry made from gold, precious stones, and shells. The Aryan people ate meat, vegetables, and fish. They were the first to introduce horse and chariot into India. Their favorite pastime was gambling, telling stories, and fighting. Children studied under gurus in gurukuls. The education was orally transmitted to them with emphasis on memory. This period also saw the beginning of the caste system. It was based on the division of occupation. Earlier, there was social mobility in the caste system, but later it became rigid. A person's occupation depended upon his birth, and the son was forced to take up his father's occupation. Ancient daily life of Hindu people. After the Vedic period, or Vedic period, there was the rise of the Mahajanapadas or states. It's about this time that Hinduism took root, and with Brahmin priests dominating. The religion became ritualistic with emphasis on sacrifices. Henceforth, religion becomes the reference point for everything guiding the life. It was also the period when ashrams became the place for learning. Ashrama life was tough for the children. They were required to do everything on their own apart from studies. The houses were made from wood, straw, and bamboo, with several rooms and balconies. The use of iron and copper were found in utility items for daily use and deities for worship. The state paid the people for welfare projects like building of roads and other public places and other public works. The city streets in that time were narrow, with shops dominating both sides. The city streets in that time were narrow, with shops dominating on both sides. People ate vegetarian and non-vegetarian food. The influence of Jainism and Buddhism made them change their food habits, and since then they eat more vegetables, fruits, and milk. Men used to wear dhoti that were 9 meters long. It was wrapped around the waist, with some of its parts covering the upper part of the body. They also wore leather shoes with thick soles. Women used to wear bright colored two-part clothing with a lot of jewelry. It included armbands, necklaces, waist belts, leg and ankle bangles, earrings, nose rings, and crowns for the rich women. The most popular form of marriage was Sawayamvara, where number of suitable grooms assembled at the bride's house, and she chose from them her husband. The other types of marriages were Gandharva and Asura Vivaha. Men used to play chess, polo, and cards. Martial arts included fencing. Wrestling was very popular among them. They used to go for hunting in their free time. There is a tremendous development in the lifestyle of people during the Gupta Empire, 320 AD to 500 AD, that covered most of North India. During the Gupta rule, there was an unprecedented peace and prosperity for the Indian subcontinent. There was religious freedom and great emphasis on education. This led to advancement in art, music, science, and other walks of life that happened. So that's just to give you sort of a quick rundown on what ancient Hindu or ancient Vedic civilization was actually like. In general, I would say that ancient India kind of runs a little bit into the Middle Ages, because the period between antiquity and the Middle Ages, not really a lot changed in India like it did in Europe. A lot of the culture remained quite the same. The religions remained the same. 12 things that you need to know about Hinduism. So religion played a very large role or influence in Vedic and later Hindu civilization. Hinduism is at least 5,000 years old. Hinduism is one of a few ancient religions to survive into modern times. The collection of traditions that compose modern-day Hinduism have developed over at least the past 5,000 years, beginning in the Indus Valley region in the nations of modern India and Pakistan, in what was the largest civilization of the ancient world. There was no founder of Hinduism, nor a single prophet or initial teacher. Hindus believe their religion has no identifiable beginning or end, and as such often refer to it as Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way. As for the name itself, Hindu is a word first used by Persians, dating back to the 6th century BC, to describe the people living beyond the Indus River. Initially, it did not have a specific religious connotation. The religious meaning of the term did not develop for roughly another 1,000 years. The Vedas, or the Vadas, are one of Hinduism's many primary religious texts. There are other ones too. As I've already pointed out, there are several works. There isn't a primary book or a primary religious reference. Hinduism does not have a single holy book that guides religious practice. Instead, Hinduism has a large body of spiritual texts that guide devotees. First among these are the Vedas, knowledge in Sanskrit, a collection of hymns on the divine forces of nature presenting key Hindu teachings. The Vedas, considered to be realized or revealed eternal truths, were passed down via an oral tradition for thousands of years before being written down. Hindu philosophy was further developed in the Upanishads. This philosophy was restated in the Puranas, the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata, the world's longest epic poem, as well as the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. Countless life stories, devotional poetry, and commentaries by sages and scholars have also contributed to the spiritual understanding and practice of Hindus. Hinduism is one of 4 dharmic or Indic traditions. The others besides Hinduism are Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, which can be referred to as the Dharmic or Indic traditions. The Dharma traditions share a broadly similar worldview and share many spiritual concepts such as dharma, karma, samsara, and moksha. Though each religion understands and interprets them differently. Hinduism sees the divine present in all existence. It is by nature a pantheistic religion. The deepest single spiritual truth presented through the Vedas is that Brahman, roughly understood in English as the absolute or the divine, pervades the entire universe. This divine reality or its essential nature is present in all living beings, eternal and full of bliss. Brahman is understood as the cause of creation, as well as its preservation, and dissolution and transformation, all done in a constant repeating cycle. The nature of the divine is understood in different ways in different lineages. Within Hinduism, there is a broad spectrum of understandings about the nature of Brahman. Some Hindus believe that Brahman is infinite and formless and can be worshipped as such or in different forms. Other Hindus believe that the divine is infinite and has a transcendental form. For example, some Vaishnavas believe that the one supreme form is Krishna, while Shivavites call this form Shiva. Hinduism worships the divine in both male and female animal form. Because Hindus believe that Brahman can take form, they accept that there are a variety of ways in which all human beings can connect with the divine. This universal divinity is worshipped in both male and female forms. The female form is known as Devi, which is a manifestation of Shakti, energy or creative force. Other forms combine male and female aspects together, and some resemble animals, such as Ganesh, or Hanuman. Each of these forms has a symbolic meaning. Hindus have long told stories about these various forms of the divine to inspire devotion and instill ethical values. Hindus pray to different aspects of the divine. Hindus pray to different forms of Brahman, has manifestations of particular divine qualities or powers. For example, Ganesh is honored by Hindus, as well as sometimes by followers of other Indian religions, as the remover of obstacles and honored for his great wisdom, and is often invoked before beginning any important task or project. Saraswati is the goddess associated with learning and wisdom. Lakshmi is worshipped as the goddess of prosperity. God is believed to have taken the human form of Rama to show people how to live the path of Dharma. Krishna is said to come to eradicate evil and protect good. Shiva is worshipped as the Lord of time and change. Furthermore, the prominence of each of the aspects of the divine varies depending on the lineage of the individual Hindu. Hindus use images in worship to make the infinite comprehensible to the human mind. Hindus represent the various forms of God in consecrated images called murti. A murti can be made of wood, stone, or metals, and sometimes can be naturally occurring, rather than fashioned by human hands. Murti offer a way to visualize and meditate upon Brahman, which, due to its infinite nature, is believed to be beyond the grasp of the human mind. Murti is often inaccurately translated as idol, but a more accurate translation is embodiment. Hindu families conduct their daily worship at home altars and also at temples on special occasions. Many Hindus consult gurus, recognized spiritual teachers and guides, for advice or answers to spiritual questions. Hindus believe the soul is eternal and is reborn in different forms. Hindus believe that the soul, Atman, is eternal. When the physical body dies, the soul is reborn in another body. This continuous cycle of life, death, and rebirth is called samsara. Rebirth is governed by karma, the principle that every action, be it physical or mental, has a result, like cause and effect. What an individual experiences in this life is the result of their past actions, either actions they have already taken in this life or actions from a past life. How an individual acts today impacts the future, both in terms of effects felt later on in this life or in a future birth. Though the effects of karma make certain actions easier or more difficult to take, just as our personal habits influence our lives, This is not a deterministic or fatalistic system. Rather, we all have the ability to freely choose how to act in any situation. Hindus believe we each have four goals in life. Hindus believe we have four goals in life. Dharma, conducting ourselves in a way conducive to spiritual advancement. Artha, the pursuit of material prosperity. Kama, enjoyment of the material world. And moksha, liberation from the attachments caused by dependence on the material world and from the cycle of birth and rebirth. There are four paths to moksha. Hindu scripture outlines the primary paths to experience God's presence and ultimately obtain the fourth goal, moksha. These paths are not mutually exclusive and can be pursued simultaneously depending on an individual's inclination. These paths are karma yoga, performing one's duties selflessly, bhakti yoga, loving God through devotion and service, jnana yoga, study and contemplating sacred texts, and Raja Yoga, physically preparing the body and mind to allow deep meditation and introspection so as to overcome suffering caused by material attachments. Hinduism acknowledges the potential for truth in other religions. Hinduism is a deeply pluralistic tradition, promoting respect for other religions and acknowledges the potential for truth in them. Hindus see the varieties of religions and philosophies as different ways to understand and relate to God, Dharma, or Brahman. This philosophy leads to pluralism within Hinduism and outside of it. The core philosophy of Hinduism is the search for truth, not the specific path taken. A quote from the Vedas that summarizes the Hindu perspective is, "Truth is one. The wise call it by various names." So this is very different from the Abrahamic religions, which will all claim that they alone have the absolute truth. The Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims each claim that their scriptures are the absolute. Everything else is a corruption. This is not true for Hinduism and for most other of these pre-Axle age religions. I will not be talking about Buddhism as such in this lecture, or Jainism. I will just be talking more so just about Hinduism and daily life in ancient India. But it's important to understand that the machinations of the spiritual world and the types of rituals and practices that were practiced had a very overwhelming influence on how people thought and acted, more or less. Rick Perry says, "Woo!" What's up, Rick Perry? Code of Truth. What is up, Code of Truth? Forge Gang! Remember that 99% of the peoples who followed these religions knew only of the exoteric interpretations. I'm not entirely for sure about that, Code of Truth. I don't really think that they thought that much in terms of the multifacetedness about it. The mystery schools came a lot later. The Indian magi were small in number. It was the Brahmin and the Magi and the Gurus that tended to be the spiritual gurus. Remember that Hinduism existed for 2,000 years before Buddhism did. This is probably the oldest still living religion on earth. Code of Truth, the Magi have the esoteric. You're thinking a little bit deeply into it. You don't understand very well how Eastern philosophies work. You're thinking in terms of a Westerner. You have a very Occidentalist, Hellenistic, or Hellenic metaphysical mindset in regards to how you interpret Oriental religions and Oriental philosophies. Code of Truth. You have to understand that there is no barriers and separations and fixed parameters in Eastern religions as such. It's very different from the West. You're coming at this like a Greek. You're coming at this like a Greek thinker, and you're not really fully understanding it. The Magi taught both the esoteric and the exoteric, one and indivisible. The beginning of the left-hand path and the right-hand path began with the development of the mystery schools that happened later. Indian Magi were also Proto-Indo-European. They were of many races and many ethnicities. They were not white people. You're thinking like an extreme inbred hillbilly, okay? You're talking like an inbred hillbilly from Appalachia. You sound like a very uneducated inbred toothless hillbilly. Now, I don't think that you're an inbred toothless hillbilly, but I really doubt that the Hindus were Nordics. Okay, so yeah, I mean, that kind of mindset, Code of Truth, that you have, that mindset led to genocide. That led to the deaths of millions of people, and that kind of mindset is what led to genocide and to war. Rick Perry says, I'm still a hard man. You forgot to say Forge Gang. All right, so now I'm going to go to local histories. This is by Tim Lambert, and this belongs to Tim Lambert. This property belongs to Tim Lambert. This is his. I'm just letting you know that Tim Lambert from Local Histories wrote this. I'm using his work. The credit goes to him. It doesn't go to me, and so I don't plan to make money out of that. So here we go. A History of Ancient India by Tim Lambert. The Indus Valley Civilization. The first Indian civilization arose in the Indus Valley about 2600 BC. It actually straddled northwest India and Pakistan. By 6500 BC, the people of the area had begun farming. By 5500 BC, they had invented pottery. By about 2600 BC, a prosperous farming society had grown up. The farmers used bronze tools. They grew wheat, barley, and peas. They also raised cattle, goats, and sheep. Water buffalo were used to pull carts. The people spun cotton, and they traded with other cultures, such as modern-day Iraq. Some of the people of the Indus Valley began to live in towns. The two largest were at Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Mohenjo-Daro probably had a population of 35 to 50,000. By the standards of the ancient world, it was very large. It consisted of two parts. One part was a citadel. It contained a public bath and assembly halls. It also had a granary where grain was stored. The lower part of the town had streets laid out in a grid pattern. The houses were 2 or even 3 stories and were made of brick, as stone was uncommon in the area. Bricks were of a standard size, and the Indus River and the Indus Valley civilization had standard weights and measures. The streets had networks of drains. Life in Mohenjo-Daro was obviously highly civilized and ordered, although most of the people of the Indus Valley civilization were farmers outside the towns. The Indus Valley civilization had a form of writing, but unfortunately, it has not been deciphered, so nothing is known of their political system or their religion. However, many engraved seals and terracotta figurines have been found. The Indus Valley civilization was at its peak in the years 2300 to 1700 BC. Then, for reasons that we don't entirely know, probably because of climate change, it broke down. Probably because of climate change and also because of invaders from the north. The reasons for these are not clear. Perhaps there is a climatic change and the area grew cooler and drier. It has also been suggested rivers changed course. In those days, less rainfall or a change in the course of a river could have had severe consequences for farming, and of course, like all early civilizations, the Indus Valley depended on farming. Civilization was only possible if the farmers made a surplus. They could exchange their surplus with craftsmen for manufactured goods. They could also exchange some for goods from far away. However, if the farmers no longer had a surplus, they could no longer support the craftsmen who lived in the towns. The populations of the towns would drift away to the countryside. Trade and commerce would decline. As society grew less prosperous, people would return to a simpler way of life, and the invention of writing would disappear. The Indus Valley civilization vanished and it was forgotten. It was not discovered until the 1920s. The Aryans. After the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization, a new people entered India. The Indo-Aryans came from Central Asia, and they probably entered India through Afghanistan after 1500 BC. They were probably waves of invasions. There were probably multiple waves of invasions over a long span of time rather than just one. The Indo-Aryans were a semi-nomadic people of pastoralists. At first, they wandered about with their herds of cattle rather than live in one place. They had 2-wheeled chariots which allowed them to subdue the native people. By 1000 BC, they had learned to use iron. However, in time, the Indo-Aryans settled down and became farmers. Slowly, a more ordered and settled society evolved, and tribes became kingdoms. The Aryans became priests, rulers, and warriors, free peasants and merchants. The subdued people became slaves, laborers, and artisans. In time, this stratified society crystallized into the caste system. The Hindu religion also evolved at this time. The sacred literature called the Vedas was created. At first, they were orally transmitted. Later, they were written down. In time, the Indo-Aryans learned to farm rice rather than crops like barley. By 600 BC, rice cultivation was flourishing in India. With a more settled and ordered society, trade and commerce flourished. In time, people began to live in towns again, and writing was reinvented. By 600 BC, a highly civilized society had emerged in India. Although Buddha was born in India in 483 BC, the religion he founded failed to take root in the country. At approximately the same time, the Persians captured the extreme northwest of India. Alexander the Great destroyed the Persian Empire and penetrated the far northwest of India. However, after he died in Babylon in 317 BC, the Greeks withdrew. The Persians and Greeks had little effect on Indian civilization. The various Indian Mahapajandas, or kingdoms that had begun to conquer one another, and after 322 BC, the first great empire arose. The Mauryan Empire in India. In 322 BC, Chandragupta Maurya became king of the powerful and highly centralized state of Magadha in the north of India. Magadha in the north of India. Chandragupta founded a great empire. After Alexander the Great died, his empire split up. Seleucus took the eastern part. He attempted to reclaim the Indian provinces once ruled by Alexander. However, his army was stopped by Chandragupta in 305 BC. Seleucus was then forced to cede most of Afghanistan to Chandragupta, who also conquered parts of central India. This new empire was rich and trade thrived. Its capital was one of the largest cities in the ancient world. In 296 BC, Chandragupta abdicated in favor of his son Bindusara, who pushed the frontier of the empire further south. The greatest Mauryan ruler was Ashoka, or Asoka, who reigned from 269 to 232 BC. He conquered Kalinga, modern-day Orissa. Afterward, he declared that he was appalled by the suffering caused by war and decided against any further conquest. Asaka also converted to Buddhism. He decreed that the Buddhist principles of right conduct should be engraved in stone pillars on rocks throughout his kingdom to teach the people how to live. Asoka set about pacifying and consolidating his empire. However, despite his conversion to Buddhism, Mauryan rule was authoritarian, and punishments for wrongdoers were severe. After his death, the Mauryan Empire declined, as all empires do. It suffered an economic decline and political instability as different brothers tried to become king. A general assassinated the last Mauryan ruler. A general assassinated the last Mauryan ruler in 185 BC. The general then took over running the empire and founded the Shanga dynasty. However, in 73 BC, the last Shanga ruler was in turn assassinated. They were replaced by the Kanva dynasty, which ruled from 73 to 28 BC. The influence of the Maharans penetrated southern India. In the time of the Mayurans, the farmers there became more advanced. By the 1st century BC, organized kingdoms had grown up and trade and commerce was flourishing in southern India. After Alexander the Great's death, his empire was split between his generals. The various successor states fought each other until a strong state emerged in Bactria, roughly modern-day Afghanistan. The Greek rulers of Bactria attempted to control northwest India. About 185 BC, King Demetrius invaded India. About 160 BC, one of his successors, King Menander, conquered most of northern India. King Menander conquered most of northern India. However, after the death of Menander, this empire broke up into separate states. And Indian civilization developed without European influence. The Kushan, the Kushan, the Kushan. India now faced a new invader. Nomads from Central Asia conquered Bactria in about 120 BC. They then settled down and gave up their nomadic lifestyle. They were split into 5 tribes. One of the tribes, the Kushans, conquered the others. They then turned their attention to northern India. Gradually, they conquered more and more territory. Successive kings carved out a bigger and bigger empire in northern India. The Kushan Empire reached its peak under King Kanishka, who reigned from 78 to 114 AD. During his reign, northern India was prosperous and did much trade with the Roman Empire. Kanishka was also a patron of the arts, which flourished. However, after his death, the empire declined and broke up. By the early 3rd century AD, India was once again split into small states. And I am going to end there. On that, and finally from istmira.com, Drugoi Drivini Mir, Drivinyaya India Kratko. Ancient India, very briefly. You can talk about this topic for a very long time because civilization, which originated in the Indus Valley, had a rich history. But in this article, we will briefly review the history of ancient India. The birth of an organized society in the Indus Valley should be dated to Harappan civilization, which originated in the 3rd millennium BC, and her dawn comes from this period. Harappan civilization. This is dated approximately 3000 to 1300 BC. It is characterized by monumental construction of stone. Irrigation agriculture already existed. There is information that it was in this period that the first toilets appeared, as well as sewers. At this stage of development, the Indians mainly smelted bronze products, but also used copper. Trade was very developed. Civilization conducted trade with the states of Central Asia and Mesopotamia. The written language of this civilization has not been decrypted until now. They wrote, but they wrote from right to left, which is very interesting. When weather conditions began to deteriorate, the main activity that brought the civilization down was agriculture. Agriculture began to decline. Around the middle of the second millennium, the population began to migrate west and lost its level of development. Vedic civilization. The most interesting period of the ancient history of India is undoubtedly Vedic, since after it there were a lot of archaeological and documentary sources that made it possible to study this period in maximum detail. Vedic civilization dated from the second millennium BC up to about the 6th to 4th centuries BC. The most famous monument of this period is a sacred book called the Vedas. It recorded everything about the social structure of society, about laws, customs, etc. Analyzing it, we come to the conclusion that the whole society was divided into large estates. There were 4 of them in total. Shudra, the lowest caste, which included wage workers and slaves. Vishya, merchants, artisans, and farmers were assigned here. Kshatriya, it is an honorary class of warriors. Brahmana, the ruling elite should be carried here, priests, rulers, and scientists. However, there were several hundred castes in total. The caste could not be left, but they could have been expelled from it for misconduct. For example, for relations with members of another caste. In this era, the writing Sanskrit was developed, which was completely decrypted, and therefore there is plenty of data on this period. The foundation of the world-class religion and the influence of Hinduism was also laid. A pantheon of the gods and goddesses was established. The people who created the Vedic Hindu civilization are called the Aryans that conquered the territories of India. The time of the petty principalities. Around the 4th century BC in India, several hundred small city-states were created that lasted 3 centuries. In the 4th century, Alexander the Great came to India, subjugating the significant territory of India. But after his death, the Indians soon freed themselves. After that, the Mauryan Empire was created in their place. But this is a completely different topic. Contribution to the world culture of ancient India. In the period of ancient history, many states existed in India, from the mysterious civilizations of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa to the Mauryan Empire. This period is full of mysteries and secrets. But many of the things created at this time have significantly enriched world culture. The article is devoted to a brief review of the main achievements of the culture of ancient India. First, spiritual and religious practices. India during ancient history gave the world one of the 3 world religions, Buddhism. In addition, the sacred books, Vedas, were created. They are the basis of Hinduism, Buddhism, as well as many practices of meditation such as yoga. Secondly, Indian architecture, many of what was built during this period did not reach us. but still there were structures that could cause delight and surprise. Ruins of the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. These mysterious centers were built in the 3rd millennium BC. As a result of the disaster, which historians have definitely not established, civilization disappeared. And only in 20 centuries, archaeologists have found traces of these cities and their ruins. More than 36 caves in which one architectural Elora, more than 36 caves in which one architectural complex is built, performed the function of the temple. Thirdly, the achievements in science. Mathematics should be highlighted mainly because the numbers that we use and call Arabic were actually invented in India. We're talking about the number zero, and even the numbers that we use. The ancient Greeks and Romans and people for much of the Middle Ages did not use the numbers that we use. They used what is called as Roman numerals. The numbers that we use now is basically we are using the numbers that were invented in India. Also, the Greeks and Romans and people of the Middle Ages did not have the concept of zero. Zero was invented separately by the Hindus and the Mayans. And it was brought into Europe through the Muslims and through Al-Andalus. In addition, medicine developed in India. They knew how to straighten bones, conduct surgical operations, and were able to prepare medicines from herbs. These, as well as mathematical knowledge, were adopted by the Arabs, and already from the latter, the Europeans learned a lot. Fourth was literature. Ancient India gave the world 2 great poems, Mahabharata and Ramayana. Not all the peoples of the world at this stage had writing, and even more so, there could be no literary masterpiece. So the works of India were doubly valuable for the development of world literature. And the last was chess. Initially, the game arose as an imitation of battle, where the players had their own army with which it was necessary to win, taking into account the peculiarities of the battle of each of the figures. That is why the game has long been called Four Kings of Troops. As you can see, ancient India has given world culture many masterpieces. Moreover, this is far from a complete list. In addition, much has not been preserved to this day. However, we see the achievements relate to various fields, which is a testament to the development of the culture of ancient India. And so I hope that with that, you got to enjoy, at least for about an hour, some of the accomplishments of the Hindus, the peoples of the Indian subcontinent, and of ancient India, by far one of the most ancient civilizations in the world. So Rick Perry says, woo. Code of Truth says, remember that 99% of the peoples who followed these religions knew only of the exoteric interpretations. The Indian magi were small in number. You're mixing up you're mixing up the Hellenic metaphysicians with the Indian mystics. You're trying to say that the Hindus had mystery schools, and they did not at this time. The mystery schools that you're talking about arose later. The Magi have the esoteric. No, they don't. You don't understand. You don't really understand how these things work. Indian Magi were also Proto-Indo-European. Well, I'm glad that you condone genocide, man. I'm glad that you support colonialism and genocide of native populations. Rick Perry says, I am still a hard man. Rick Perry, the British Empire saw a utility in the Indian caste system and consequently based much of their theosophical system on it, pursuant to the movement toward a one world order. Well, I wasn't really talking about the British in India. You're kind of about 2,500 years off, Rick Perry. But I guess I get what you're talking about. You're kind of off by about 2,000 years at this stage. I'm more so talking about the 3rd century before Christ. You're thinking about the 18th and 19th and early 20th centuries. But yeah, I guess I don't know that much about theosophy. What do you think about Manly P. Hall, if I may ask? Do you know anything about that guy? But yeah, Friedrich Nietzsche was greatly influenced from reading a lot of Hindu texts and sacred scrolls and philosophies. A lot of 19th century European academics and scholars actually were greatly influenced by the Hindu caste system. It was actually one of the ways of which we came to learn about Indo-European studies, the commonalities of all of these different languages: Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, Persian, etc. But anyways, what about the theosophical system? I thought that most of the elites in Britain, if they were not the tribes people, were like Sufists. Like Aleister Crowley was a Sufist, or he practiced being a Sufist. Forge gang! Rick Perry says, Forge gang, let's go. Theosophy is like a religious Esperanto. So it's basically not really itself a religion any more so than it was just a kind of a modification, a Swiss Army knife that had different tools from different spiritual practices, is what you're saying. What's up, Dedimus Summidid? Dedimus Summidid says, all that esoteric stuff is gay fan fiction written by goobers. Yeah, most of the ancient scholars and writers did not actually really separate these things apart. Prior to at least the foundation of the mystery schools, and really prior to the Middle Ages, there wasn't really fixed definitions as such. All of the philosophy and all of the different definitions came later, after most of these religions had already been founded and their primary texts and records had already been compiled. So, I mean, Hinduism, I don't think that Hinduism and Eastern philosophies really separate these things. That's Western philosophies that tend to do that. Aleister Crowley was a gay chomo. I would agree with that. I would actually agree. Rick Perry says that theosophy was really designed as a public initiation for the masses, hence the New Age. That does make sense. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. I'm only talking about life in ancient India, though. Yeah, theosophy is an eclectic mishmash system of shop-soiled perennialism. But perennialism technically pre-existed theosophy, or the rise of theosophy as such. Okay. I've gone beyond the parameters of what this stream was intended to do, so I'm finished. Thank you all for watching and have an awesome day.